Ariel. How are you?
Good. How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
So I want to quickly introduce myself. I'm Ariel Basca. I'm actually of Ghouls Magazine is who I'm representing today, but I have to give you a quick hello from the Psycho Cinema group at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester.
Yes.
Because I'm also a part of that group, and we all love you and worship you.
Did we get to meet when I was there?
I did not actually get to meet you, unfortunately. I was not at that Psychorama, unfortunately.
I hope the stylist can come to Psychorama if Psychorama ever comes back.
Please. I'm desperate for Psychorama to come back. Like, we had such wonderful plans for it that had to be scuppered because of a pandemic, and, you know.
Have you guys tried to do any virtual events or anything?
I mean, yeah, we've had some virtual events, and to be honest, the Alamo Drafthouse Winchester is actually open. Okay. I'm not going to things there personally because I can't. But Faye is still holding things there, but not like massive screenings.
Yeah.
Because everything has to be 50% capacity or less. So anyway. But hopefully you will be able to come and grace us with your presence in this wonderful film. I would love that. So,
me too. I'd love to come back.
Oh man, because I remember watching your short when it appeared at Lost Weekend. It actually appeared at Lost Weekend the same year that you were at Psychorama, I believe. And
yes.
Yeah, and I had like all this hope and joy in my heart after I saw that short film, and I was like, this Jill I'm sorry, I'm going to say your name right. Jill Gevargizian, is that right?
Very close.
Oh,
It's Gevargizian.
Gevargizian, that's right. Gevargizian. I was actually rehearsing it earlier, and I think I had it correct earlier, and then I went back to my older pronunciation. I'm sorry about that. But I wanted to just say thank you for coming out to Virginia into the wilds to share that. And I was so glad that you were such a wonderful success story in terms of building on the excitement of a short film to create a feature-length film, and there had to be like a lot of trials and tribulations in terms of getting that made from the short to the feature length. And I wondered, when you made the short, did you have the feature already in mind?
Yeah, it was when the concept first dawned on me, I wanted it to be a feature, but I knew and wanted more experience as a director before I tried to make the jump from short film to feature, because I had only directed one short film at that time, and it was a pretty small project in scope compared to even the Stylist short. So I knew there's no way I was jumping from that to like an hour and a half or 2 hour movie. So it just seemed to make sense that we can tell this in the short story makes sense as well as a feature. So we hoped we can start here, and if it turns out as well as we hope, that it's going to be a tool for us to use to hopefully get the feature made, was the idea. And the biggest thing I learned in hindsight was I wish we kind of had the feature script ready sooner, because when the short first came out, we had a lot of interest in is there a feature version of this? And we're like, yes, but not yet. But honestly, now 5 years later, we're happy that we got to do this kind of truly independently, instead of a studio attached to it where we would have to take their opinions creatively and stuff. So we really got to this way make the film we wanted. It just took quite a few years, and we had a producer attached to it at one point that at that point I was like, oh, now we're gonna get this made, no question, and kept kind of having these exciting moments, and then it deflates, and then something else, and finally I got to the point where I was like, we got to figure out how to make this movie. I reached out to the kind of main crew from the short film, and I asked them, I was like, how do you guys feel? about just going after it ourselves. Like, we start with a Kickstarter, we piece it together, the rest of the budget as we go, and I was actually scared to ask them that, but they were like, hell yeah, let's do it. And here we finally are.
That's an amazing story, because I think so many women are terrified of like going out and doing it on their own in particular. You know, so many filmmakers from all around the globe are having to basically make films on their credit cards. And
yeah.
Just to hear that story is so inspiring, actually, because it is such a wonderful work and clearly, you know, demonstrates that there is an audience for this kind of story as well, with the success it had at Nightstream and that I'm sure it's having now. And I also kind of wanted to ask, making this film from Claire's perspective so explicitly, like you are in Claire's head the entire time, how did you think about that when you were developing the script with your collaborators and as you were directing the film? Because there are so many moments that are quietly just in her head, and you do such a wonderful job of just crafting her experience. And I wondered what your thought was as to the setup of that.
Yeah, it was definitely always Claire's story to me, and so and what's great is kind of my two, like, the biggest collaborators on the film, my DP Rob Stern and production designer Sarah Sharp. They both came from the short, so they've got all this years of marinating on the idea with me. But we approached it when we always were like the camera. We wanted everything to represent how Claire feels, from how the camera is portraying something to how the music feels, to everything. But, like, especially, for instance, when I was going through the film with my composer, Nick Ewert, the first time, we discussed, like, there's, you know, kind of these stalking type scenes, and we're like, how do we approach this differently? It needs to be how she feels, not how the victim feels, which is like, it's like, what does that mean? It's like hunting versus being hunted, and which is still scary, it's just a different thing, a different type of scary. But especially with the camera and really kind of just how we portray everything, this is like subtle, but I wanted people to almost become like a delusion, like you're pulled so far onto Claire's side that you're like, you're not even sure if you're seeing reality anymore. This is just how she perceives this moment, even though, you know, the camera's not obviously like POV, but it's the camera like is Claire's feelings. Because we kind of try to make you kind of dislike other characters just because she doesn't like them, and not really because there's a real reason not to like them. Like Olivia, our other main character, her husband, we present in this delusional Claire way, and even later in the film with Olivia, when things kind of get confrontational, there's this very confrontational scene in a parking deck, and I feel like from Claire's perspective it's like horrifically sad, but what Olivia's saying is totally just understandable and laying boundaries that anybody should be able to set for in relationships. But yeah, we wanted like everything to hinge on Claire, and we cut a few things out of the film and realized like this moment doesn't make sense to have here, because Claire can't even see this scene already.
Yeah.
I think we really showed Olivia by herself, and it was really very rare and mostly to like mirror Claire.
In that split screen that you have. Yeah. And I
really ramble.
Oh, no. But I love that with Claire too, you have like this beautiful sense of universality almost to her pathology. Like, you know, she's sort of a unique kind of psychopath in that she's so completely relatable, and yet at the same time, Like her psychopathology is a little bit vague, and so it's funny because you see her projecting all of these things onto Olivia, but at the same time, it feels like the audience can project almost anything they want to onto Claire as well. And so I think that's one of the reasons why she works so wonderfully narratively.
Yeah, which we also get flack for this, but we didn't want to lay out her backstory, like word for word. This is exactly what happened. This is why this is how she became this. And one of my collaborators on the script, Eric Havens, they said, which he said it in like in a way better way, but if you don't leave like spaces for people to insert themselves, then you're just telling them how it is versus it being kind of like something you interpret however it connects to you. Which we wanted to hint at it, and we tried to in conversations with Olivia's character and just stuff that she around the house and stuff she does, but never wanted to say exactly. We joke now that like 10 years we'll make the prequel and then everyone will get the answer.
No, but it's actually kind of wonderful because in that same way that you don't ever really know what that hairdresser who's doing your hair, you don't ever get to fill in all of those gaps with that one stranger that you're having those conversations with.
I've never thought about it like that, and that is super cool. I'm going to pretend I did that on purpose. Because, it is. That's something else we also wanted to show off. Is I've been a hairstylist for a long time. I still am. And I wanted to show off what was unique to that world that a lot of people don't know, and I definitely haven't seen in very many movies before, that relationship, what's unique about it, and that really does play into the movie, that anonymity that's between people, but then that you open up way more than with even your best friend, maybe, to your hairstylist. It's a really interesting thing.
And I loved that implication that was in the short as well as the beginning of this film, about, the fact that you tell things, because you have this deep sense of intimacy, because you're never going to see that person again. And at the same time, it's also commenting on how undervalued this sector of women's work is. And Alexandra Heller Nicholas is a friend of mine who also is a huge advocate for this film, and she really loves this particular aspect of the film. And as do I, that, undervalued women's labor is something that, is sort of her cause when it comes to talking about women in horror. But also, when you think of women hairstylists, when you think of women in these professions who exist basically to beautify women, to make them feel better about themselves in different ways, a lot of times this labor is very much underpaid and underappreciated. And I wondered, for you, when you were making this film, how much of your personal experience would you say informed individual scenes and so forth?
Definitely a lot, maybe too much. And all these little silly things that aren't like my experience as a hairstylist, but sorry, I lost my train of thought. My team definitely jokes about it to an extent, because even her like eating tomato soup by herself in the kitchen, I've sent them a picture of myself eating soup, and I'm like, oh man, I think I put too much of myself in this movie. But we bring up Alexandra. In fact, she wrote a piece about the movie. I can't talk about where it's going yet, but and discuss that. And I told her after I read it, I was like, man, I didn't consciously, try to make a film about class or women's jobs. And I was like, it's just so interesting, that perspective. And it is something I think maybe can be treated, almost like it's a servant type position. But from my perspective, doing that job, I've never really felt that way. In fact, what I love about it is, and I think that's what Claire loves about it too, is that you feel like you really can provide something really special for somebody. It's not just like doing their hair, and it's not even just about them making them think they look good. It's like how they feel, and also it's important to make people feel like comfortable and safe and not judged. And I think that's what people most connect to with the hairstylists that they stay with, is that they feel safe there. Like they can come in with ask for their whatever to be waxed off their face, anything, like there's no judgment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like that part, like that's one of my favorite things about the job, other than it's creative, so that part's really fun too, but to be able to meet that many people and provide that for them.
Yeah. So of course creating a sense of, absolute danger within that space would be the most horrific thing for you, right?
You're right.
That much trust in someone.
Yeah. And no one really thinks about, except for I think when little kids first kind of get their hair cut, a lot of them are naturally horrified because a stranger's coming at them with scissors. I think I've noticed the parents that really set up the situation, it's not scary. They explain this is what's going to happen and kind of show, versus just sit in a chair and without someone coming out with scissors. Yeah, that would be terrifying. But yeah, it's just, we also want to play into that vulnerability that we all kind of take for granted when you're sitting in that chair. But I always joke with my clients that I think I'm going to dye it this color instead. I'm very lighthearted like that. I come out with the color and I'm I made green instead. I think that's going to be better than what you wanted. But, okay, I lost my train of thought there.
I mean, it's interesting how you play with kind of the sensuality and the intimacy of the relationship between the client and the hairstylist in that opening credits scene with the scalp massage that, makes me want to go get a scalp massage. Except I can't.
Yeah.
In the middle of a freaking pandemic. But, it's amazing, though, how you kind of create horror within that space that feels so intimate. And it's also very interesting in terms of looking at female relationships in your film. And sort of that constant feeling of, I mean, it seems, especially in that scene in the bathroom, there's some sense that there's always some kind of insecurity and tension within female friendships as well, that is sort of something that you're also commenting on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've realized since actually being interviewed by a few men who have pointed out the female relationship and how I've had multiple in the last few days say to me that, if a guy met another dude and they wanted to hang out, you just let's go get a beer, and we just go get a beer. There's not any pressure around it. And I wonder, it's almost like a woman, even a heterosexual woman meeting up with another one, it's almost like a date, the pressure of what am I going to wear? Am I going to bring the right wine or say something stupid? And it's interesting that I think a lot of people, we don't even realize what is ingrained in us through society and these pressures that we have to acknowledge before that can change or anything. And with that bathroom scene in the club, which is kind of an iconic movie scene. I feel like they've done a lot. There's kind of the bitchy bathroom scene, I call it. I didn't want it to feel that mean girl, but I was it was another thing where we wanted it to feel like this is Claire's perspective of it. It's not maybe that bad. It's maybe not that bad that they'd be why is the hairstyle scene? They've never really heard about her before. This is her bachelorette party. And so made it seem a lot meaner than I wanted those girls to actually be.
But But just
Which is a weird
it's
line.
framed
Yeah.
and shot, like in Heathers or in,
Yeah.
any number of other teen comedy films or, yeah.
Totally, and I love all of those type of movies, like Clueless and Heathers. I grew up on that shit.
Yeah, and I really think it's interesting though that so many male critics and interviewers have picked up on this because it is something that I've experienced, where I don't worry when I'm going out with my male friends, but I do with my female friends. That I have to look a certain way, I have to appear a certain way, I have to behave a certain way. And I can be a little more punk, I can be different, But there's a performative aspect to, I think, female relationships that I think your film gets to that, I was curious how much of it was intentional and how much of it was kind of just explored in the performances of the actresses, because Najara Townsend and Brea Grant both do such wonderful work here.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because their characters, from Olivia's perspective, she's kind of just trying to be nice and maybe not trying to instigate a lifelong best friendship that Claire is hoping that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It almost plays more honestly like a romantic relationship. The whole film.
Yeah, it does. And and then you also have, her, I'm sure you get asked about this a lot, her masturbating on Olivia's bed in her bedroom and what that means.
People are afraid to bring it up because it's awkward.
Really? I'm not afraid to bring it up. Okay, sorry. I go there.
No, please do. I'm like, is anyone ever going to ask me about this?
I will absolutely ask you about this because I'm pretty sure she's heterosexual from everything that's indicated in the film. And you yourself, just a minute ago, said so. Or I think you did.
Well, I'm just kind of talking about those relationships.
Oh, those relationships. With her, my question was just kind of, is the obsession sexual in your opinion as well as being emotional?
It's not, from my perspective. It's a very weird scene that I always viewed as her trying to connect with her on this very strange level, like almost trying to feel that as Olivia, versus wanting to be with her. But I always knew like that interpretation was very possible, because there's lots of things that you could interpret as romantic instead of just obsession, and I actually think it's really cool. I've seen a lot of reviews that are from the queer community that pull all this out that I just think is awesome. And I think that's why it's good that we didn't clarify things like that, because people can insert that into there. And it's also not surprising because one of my co-writers, Eric Havens, is a non-binary, and something that they kind of came out with in recent years, and I think that naturally came out with their battle with kind of coming to terms with that and opening up about it, and so I think that naturally was in there. In fact, when I read that and shared it with them, and that's what we were like, that kind of stuff just like comes out without us even knowing it. And like similarly with me, this whole film's so much about anxiety, which was never a focus for me, but I'm like have battle with anxiety a lot personally, and I was like, well, everyone's called me out. I clearly put all my anxiety into this movie. I didn't know it.
I mean, it's funny because it works on so many different levels as a film, because there clearly is this anxiety and this pressure that she's constantly under, either to go cold turkey or to, cover up her shame about her poverty or to cover up her shame about something she's done in her past, or, you know, to expiate her guilt in some way. But at the same time, I love that you have all of these other narratives about what it is to be female. You can look at it as a queer-coded film. And there are all these many layers. And I wondered, in terms of looking at the ending, okay, I'm going there. I'm just going to the ending because I'm going to be that person. So I love that your ending spends so much time not on the punchline of the horror, but on looking at Claire's face and looking at how she internalizes everything that's happening around her and that realization. And I love that that's where the film ends. And I wondered if you could kind of talk about how that came to be in the script writing process.
Yeah, even with the short film, I always envisioned like that this would be a tragedy and would end in this character's like self-destruction. And it's almost like a suicide, like a very Shakespearean type thing, which I love. Romeo and Juliet's a huge influence on me and this movie. It's funny, as I say, like, I love tragedies and sad stories. I'm also a very hopeful person. I don't believe everything is sad and horrible, I swear. But I would envision, like, the short film is kind of like a very toned down version of that. People ask if it exists in the future. To me, it's kind of like the same type of ending, but much smaller scale. And but with the future, I guess I envision like she could like her last moments would be kind of like coming out as what she always wanted to be in public, not just doing that in privacy. But I think somewhere also knowing that that's not going to last very long, like that this is the end. It's kind of like this super dark destiny that she can't escape. And so yeah, I definitely wanted, that ending is like the first thing I knew for sure about the feature script, and I was so excited. I was like, this is going to be that like Shakespearean, epically tragic moment, but also wanted to be very personal with her, like you said. Like, I stole from one of my favorite filmmakers, Barry Jenkins, who did Moonlight, which is like the greatest movie of all time, and other films. But he has his actors look right into the camera often, and it's just like it's not like they're suddenly speaking to the camera, but it's, and then it's something I was like, we thought about doing in the film, and I was like, the end is when we will do that. Like, so she looks right at us, and like I wanted her to stay with people after it ended. So it was always like, it's going to start on Claire, it's going to end on her, and those first two, the end and the beginning shot, kind of being the same in a way. So yeah, and it was kind of like her coming out moment is like first her doing it and then seeing the horror she's created, and it.
Yeah.
I wanted to end there because to me it's like what happens next is obvious, like the police show up, blah blah blah. That's not exciting to see for me personally. Yeah.
But to end it on the Greek anagnoresis, that moment when you recognize everything that you've screwed up in your life at that moment. I love that. I love that choice that you made. And that was so much fun.
Thank you.
And I just want to say also that it's also wonderful. Anytime I see anyone in a bloody bridal dress, it just makes me so happy. It just always makes me happy. It makes me think of Sir Walter Scott and Lucia de Lammermoor from opera, but then it makes me think of like The Bride and Kill Bill, but it also conjures up lots of other imagery as well of, like from Greek mythology, all the women killing their husbands on their wedding nights. And,
Yes. It's like, that's kind of why when the idea for the wedding being the end of the movie came to me, I was like, this, even outside of the character stuff, give me like everything I dreamed of in an ending. Like, it can be just so design-wise, like over the top and theatrical and gothic, and it can be in a church, which is like my dream. And we actually had to create 2 wedding dresses for the film for both actresses, and this is a fun little tidbit I don't care about spoiling. The blood kind of at the end of the movie, which is only like a second, but if you watch that last second really closely, we actually use digital blood, which I'm very anti that in all cases normally, but that moment was so important emotionally that I didn't want rigging up all this tube and stuff to distract Najara from performing or anybody. I was like, this moment means too much. Like, I would rather there be no blood than it ruin, because also you deal with the complications of blood stains faces. You gotta wipe it off and then redo the makeup underneath it, and it's like, it's a big thing to reset over and over again.
Oh my
Which I was like, we're not doing it.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I come from a theater background, so like,
Yeah.
blood with makeup, it's just a nightmare. Anyway.
Yeah, it's like once you do it, you just hope like that you're done because you're covered. Like, go take a shower and we're done for the day.
Exactly. But unfortunately, I think we're running out of time. But I wanted to thank you so much for this wonderful film and for taking the time to talk with me about your process and everything. And girls rock, and keep doing it.
Thank you. I hope we can be hanging out together soon at a Psychorama.
I hope so too. It would be amazing. So, take good care.
You too. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.